All right, here for another edition of the Field of 68 Mid-Major Show, this time with my mic actually plugged in because in the first click of the recording it was not. But now we're actually going. Sean Paul here with my co-host Rocco Miller. We got a lot to talk about this week. It wasn't as jam-packed as the past couple weeks, I would say, with mid-major results, but there was still some stuff to touch on, some of the top dogs, some of the top five teams in Rocco's rankings going down. But Rocco, what kind of intrigued you most from the week in mid-major hoop?
Man, it's hard to pick because I'm tracking each of the league races across the board, and there's some leagues where there's all sorts of shuffling. We were just talking about the A-Sun, where we saw North Alabama get a program win. Tony Pujols celebrated with the students and had some awesome one-liner quotes. But then right before we recorded this here this week, they fall at our buddy Grant Leonard and the Queens Royals. And A-Sun, Jacksonville became the big story pretty quickly with 7 straight wins. Then they fall, and in a wild way, 19 point lead in the second half blown. Florida
Yep.
Gulf Coast comes all the way back. So now it's Gulf Coast and Lipscomb and Jacksonville all tied at the top. Lipscomb, we're recording this on a Thursday, has to get a win against Eastern Kentucky tonight. So that's an example of a league where carnage is going on. Same with Conference USA, where we ended up with a big mix of results last week to land with Jacksonville State, Middle Tennessee, and UTEP at the top. And now we have a matchup with Middle Tennessee and UTEP this week. Jacksonville State will have some tough home games. I think they play Liberty this weekend. So there's all sorts of awesome stuff in the Conference USA. And then there's more, teams like Cleveland State who are just running away with it.
12 straight wins, I believe.
12 straight wins, just amazing. But you got to keep your eye on it because this is mid-major basketball. There's there's all sorts of wild outcomes all the time, and in one week it can always change, and that's why we do a show every week, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I would say probably two of the most surprising results of the week happened in the Sun Belt, which isn't, I would say, super unique for the Sun Belt. I feel like the Sun Belt is probably the league that produces the most wild outcomes in a given year, just because I don't know if it's a travel or what the deal is, but there's so many strange results in that league from year in and year out. I would say the most interesting was South Alabama losing to UL Monroe, who
Yeah,
had 4 wins entering the game. South Alabama had risen to top 100 status in KenPom, and they lost, which was just pretty crazy. I mean, South Alabama had just been so hot, and UL Monroe is clearly, if not the worst, the second worst team in that league behind Louisiana. And then yesterday, as we're recording this, App State at home fell to Mike Jones and the Old Dominion Monarchs. So that league continues to be very strange too. Old Dominion 5-4, I believe, in league play. I'm gonna pull that up here. Let's see, they are 6-4 in league play. I shortchanged
six
them a
and
little
four.
bit. So Mike Jones has been doing an awesome job. And hey, when you have a pair of players like Sean Dewar Gordon and Robert Davis, you're gonna have a chance to really win some games. Those two went off once again. They're gonna have a chance to win some real games in this conference, and probably not a team I'd want to face in the conference tournament, given how good they have been so far this season against good teams. But that South Alabama result, I mean, just so strange to me. South Alabama went 10 for 39 from three. Obviously, not a very good percentage. UL Monroe went 11 for 30. But, like, just so weird. I mean, they were favored by like 16, going on the road and losing. One of the strangest results I've seen all year.
Yeah, it was a game played on a Monday due to that weird weather that hit the Sun Belt area the week before. So 3 or 4 of these games in the conference were rescheduled, and this is a league where you're used to that Thursday Saturday cadence every single week, like several of the leagues we cover are. And I think maybe some of that just disrupted their usual flow. But still, you're right. UL Monroe, clearly the worst team in the league. Keith Richard, of course, been there forever, announced his retirement at the end of the season at the start of January. And, I didn't think it would happen on this night, but I knew the Warhawks, especially the ones that have been in the program longer than a year,
Mm.
they're going to play hard for Keith. I mean, he's got a great reputation down there, and he'll actually probably be involved in his successor. That's how much he's meant to the school and the
Yeah.
in the region. But they're obviously completely out resourced in the Sun Belt. And that's not just basketball; that's every sport. So anytime UL Monroe can even go 500
Yeah, didn't they
in
just
base,
lose was Rich Rod their coach in football? Yeah,
Yeah, a
or he
couple of
was
years
somewhere.
back, and then he
Yeah,
he jumped to Jack State, and now he's
that's
jumped
where he was.
again
Okay. Yeah, he's
to
at
West
West
Virginia.
Virginia again. Yeah.
Yeah. So in general, anything with UL Monroe and having to do with success is it does not come easily. And
No.
I thought it was they took it to South Alabama early on, had an 8 point halftime lead. Obviously, in a lot of these upsets, one of the common denominators is either hot 3 point shooting, which they were okay, 11 for 30, or just sheer effort. In the first place, I look personally is rebounding because that is effort, energy, and just outworking and wanting it more. And sure enough, you look at the rebounding numbers in this particular game, it was 44 to 35. That was actually part of the tweet I did for UL Monroe because that just showed they got after it. South Alabama, if you haven't seen it, Eric Fawcett, I thought did a great job doing a film breakdown of their crazy zones they do, and they're 364th in the nation. And basically, they're forcing, they want other teams to shoot threes, and then they're taking their
60%
chances.
of opponents' shots are from three. 60. Like
Yeah,
that's a lot of threes.
right. And you see, like here, the Warhawks shot 30, made 11. That was good enough for 37%. And yeah, I mean, it's crazy because when their opponents go cold, the games get ugly. You saw that win South Alabama had against James Madison, and
And
they held them
Arkansas State.
in Arkansas State 46. So it's interesting, but I think they need a little bit more tools in their toolkit to win the Sun Belt tournament. Obviously, Sun Belt tournament's a beast of its own with the crazy ladder format, but it's going to work against some teams, but there's other teams that are going to have to be able to go to a second and third different look because what do they do when a team hits like 7, 8 in a row? You got to be able to adjust.
Yeah, you got to mix a little bit of that man in there because if teams just go ballistic from three, South Alabama shoots it a lot from three as well, 50%, but that's no 60%. So that's going to be an interesting team, a lot of variance probably there. But I want you to touch a little
Yes.
bit on what you saw from UC Riverside. They pulled out another big win, this time over UC Irvine. They have successfully defeated the top two teams in the Big West in UC San Diego and UC Irvine in back-to-back games. They did a great job neutralizing Bent Lloydston, which very few teams can say that they've done this year. And Barrington Hargress continues to be an absolute monster.
Yeah, the UC Riverside story is tremendously different because right around when COVID started, there was a vote to shut down all UC Riverside athletics. It's out of the UC schools. For those unfamiliar, it's certainly the one that's least funded and supported, and that's when Mike Magpio basically got control of the program after David Patrick departed,
That's why he
and
left, wasn't it? Right? Because they were going to get rid of the
uh,
program.
yeah, and of course they couldn't pay him a lot of
Yeah.
salary. He actually made more to be an assistant at the high major. I think he went to Arkansas at that time. He's been all over since. But Meg Pio has done a great job, not only coaching the team and keeping things positive there, which he's phenomenal at, but raising money, getting talent into the program, even though he'll lose guys like Zion Poland to Florida in the
Yeah.
portal. Obviously, Barrington Hargress is a candidate for Big West Player of the Year, which has a lot of great players, and he's probably a guy that's going to get a big offer in the portal going into his junior year next year. But that's the background of Riverside. And the other thing is I went to one of their practices this summer, and they actually play their actual games in the student rec center, but they practice in this whole side gym in the back where they barely even use the student rec center, only for their games. So it's kind of funny. They you can see, if you watch the games closely there, you can see the curtain in the background, and it's basically used for all sorts of everything: volleyball, soccer, PE credits, like you name it. So it's a big multi-purpose place, and that happens to be the same place where they beat UC Irvine and UC San Diego in back-to-back games. And in that Irvine game, they had control for a lot of the second half. And of course, you knew Irvine was going to make that charge. And honestly, I love both programs. I love the league. Not really rooting for either team per se. I think it's a great story no matter who comes on top. But watching those last few minutes and watching all of overtime, it was one of the few times this year, Sean, where I felt like my heart pounding
That
because
was a back and forth. Well,
it was
and I'll
incredible.
add,
It was incredible.
uh,
Yeah.
I'll also add that nobody got to see like once I think it was UC Riverside hit a free throw to go up three or four, whatever. the feed completely cut out on ESPN Plus, so nobody actually saw. I mean, I don't know if you got a
No,
glimpse of what
nobody saw
happened,
it.
but yeah, I'm pretty
Nobody.
sure nobody saw it. Like I was tweeting, I'm like, "Oh, the game." They're like, "How'd you see it?" I'm like, I didn't. Like it. That's not
Yeah,
something
I
I
have.
saw, sadly."
Yeah, luckily I had the live stats up, so I had to trust that with when it
Yeah, I'm
went
just like,
final.
I
But
do
that was the
remember
only
though.
way.
Yeah, I do
Yeah.
remember there was one time. So I tend to do that. I did jump the gun once. This was I don't know, 2020. It was a COVID year, 2021, whatever that was. It was
Hmm.
LSU and Kansas State in some MTE. And like all the stat sites said the game was over, and it wasn't. I tweeted, "Oh man, what a big win for LSU or whatever." The game was
I
not
remember that
over.
game.
Yeah, the game was
Yeah.
definitely not over, and I looked like an idiot. But I'm just like, so now ever since then, I'm like, man, I was kind of scared. I'm like, watch this one. 4 point play happened. This game is definitely not over. But thank God I did not have to relive that moment because I'll never forget that one. That was a wild one for me. But yeah, I mean, hey, UC Riverside. Obviously, they're not going to be an at-large team. I'm
No,
starting to be pretty sure we're not getting an at-large team out of the Big West. I feel like that feels
it's
far-fetched.
possible. It's possible with Irvine. Like right now in this moment, Irvine for me would be one of the last teams in, regardless of at
Really?
large or
Okay.
not. But of course, once they go into the at large conversation, they're taking at least one more loss
Yeah.
in Henderson, and that's going to be tough. They would certainly need to get to, you would think, the Big West Finals, because you could lose to UC San Diego and it'll still be close to quad one, maybe high quad two by then. But any other loss is quad three or worse. So
They can't lose
um,
again in the regular season, though, right?
I don't think so, because
I That's what I was
then you're
thinking.
looking at two more. Then you're looking at two
Yeah.
more losses.
Yeah.
And their last UC San Diego game on the schedule is in Irvine, so it's a home
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
And and we'll be talking a lot about that one next week.
Yeah.
Just a
Yeah. I
little
mean,
sneak
I
preview
would
there.
love to see. Yeah, I would love to see an at-large team from the Big West. I think that'd be fun. So I am rooting for UC Irvine to go all the way here. And honestly, it's pretty realistic. Like there's obviously it's tough to win 12 straight games or whatever they have left, but there's not a ton of tough games here. I mean, they should beat Long Beach State pretty handily, even on the road. UC Davis, the UC San Diego one's going to be tough at home. Home against UC Santa Barbara, at Hawaii. That's never an easy place to play at the Stan Sheriff Center. But
No,
then home against CSUN, at CU, Cal State Bakersfield, at Cal State Fullerton, home against Long Beach, away at UC Davis, and away at UC Santa Barbara. I kind of feel like those last two games of the season against a UC Davis team who has a great guard in T.Y. Johnson and a very talented but very streaky UC Santa Barbara team could kind of be what defines whether this UC Irvine team has enough to get to the NCAA tournament or at least be in the NCAA tournament picture heading into the conference tournament in the Big West.
no doubt. Yeah, and I think the other angle would be if UC San Diego does win at UC Irvine, they'll have another big time win to go with their Utah State win, and they might get interesting again for an at large.
That
But
Seattle
again,
loss was such a killer though. Like if
the
that
Seattle
didn't
loss, and now
happen,
they have Riverside now too on top of
yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, if that loss
So
didn't
yeah,
happen, we'd have a different conversation.
definitely. And it's tough to swallow because when you see San Diego's humming offensively, they're one of the most beautiful teams to watch in the country. And we need that in March Madness. We need both these teams in
Absolutely.
March Madness, let's be honest. And I also think, Riverside was my pick preseason to not win the league, but win the Big West tournament because I
Win the
think,
national championship. I agree. Why not?
yes, yes. See you in San Antonio, Mr. Magpio. Either way, actually.
Yeah. So another team that took a pretty rough loss is going to be the Bradley Braves. And hey, we've talked a lot about UIC. They deserve a lot of credit. Rob Eisen has done an outstanding job there. 93-70 win for the UIC Flames in Peoria. 1.29 points per possession for the Flames. They shot 51% from 3, 14 for 27. Jordan Mason with 22 points, Javen Jackson with 25 points, and they didn't have their stud big man Sasasiani, so they went into a very tough environment, a place Bradley does not lose very often, without one of their best players, dropped 93 points, and they held Bradley to point 0.97 points per possession, 6 for 24 from downtown. So this was a huge win for the Flames. I'm going to stand on what I said a couple weeks ago. I think they're the most dangerous team in the Missouri Valley outside of Drake and Bradley, and obviously I still think Bradley's better than UIC overall, despite losing this game. But Bradley, they looked like they had an at-large shot, possibly, but I think this is probably it.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean the first meeting too, Duke Dean bailed out Bradley in
Yeah, they won by
Chicago.
one, right?
Yeah, it was basically a buzzer beater. It went
Yeah.
in with about a second left, and but I think that got UIC a little extra hungry for the revenge game out there in Peoria. Who knew it was going to shake out this way? But you look at the turnovers. Illinois Chicago. Javon Jackson had 5 steals by himself, and 15 turnovers all in for Bradley. Just a really sloppy game for their standards.
That's
Both
weird for them. Yeah.
both offensively and defensively. This was one of the Valley's, and still is one of the Valley's best defenses. And we talked about it earlier before we came on. UIC, 7 different players attempted a three, and all of them made a three. So they were feeling it as a team. 14 for 27 overall. And Jackson just, the star of the show with the 5 steals and the 25 points, but also an all-around great game for Jordan Mason, who had 7 assists, 22 points, and 7 boards. So, yeah, and I think it's interesting because UIC was down in Daytona Beach, same tournament as UC San Diego. Got to spend some time with Rob Eson between games, and they were still really figuring it out. He really liked all of his pieces. Wasn't sure. And they lost a game down there. I think it was that opener against James Madison.
Mhm.
And it was a hell of a first half. It was like tied at halftime. They let that thing get away from them. You could look at the result. James Madison won that by 18 points. And there was just a lot of like frustration and confusion between the staff. And they really, really dialed it in. And the very next day was a very similar day, and they ended up blowing out LaSalle. Of course, they lost their last one down there, but one of the things we talked about was how do you effectively use all these pieces for different matchups. And you can see, since December 4th, that early loss to Northern Iowa, they got spanked in that Missouri Valley opener early version, early December. But since that point in time, they're now 10-3 as a team, and they're 7-4 in the league. So 7-3 since that time. And they've got some great wins, winning at Seattle, winning at Illinois State, beating Drake at home, of course, getting this Bradley Road win, beating Murray State in double overtime when Murray State was on a heater. So they've really figured it out. I'm very impressed. He's got some really good assistant coaches working their butts off on the analytics side. It's an exciting program, and very long answer, Sean, but I think they are the dangerous team. And the unusual team.
There's a lot to be excited about, right? Because the Luke Yaklich era did not go as planned. I think a lot of people, including
No.
myself, were very excited for that, given all that he did to contribute to Michigan and that team that made the national title and everything he did on John Beilein's staff. Then he went to Texas and whatnot, and just didn't work out at UIC. But hiring a proven coach that had won at UAB, I don't think he made a tournament, did he? Or did he in his first year, maybe? I don't remember, but he won games at UAB. It's not like he was completely terrible at UAB. So didn't
No
make
tournaments.
it. No, but they were very competitive throughout his time there, and obviously the Andy Kennedy eras went pretty well there. But at UIC so far, it's been all signs of positive, and I think it's going to continue because that team is very talented. They play together. They have a lot of different options that can go off on a given night. And that's kind of the same case for the Drake Bulldogs, who are now 19-2, 9-2 in Missouri Valley play, with a win over a tough Northern Iowa team. They held the Panthers to 52 points, just the classic Ben McCollum Drake victory. This Drake team, they just keep winning. That's kind of what it is at this point. Another 20 points from Bennett Sturts. But since losing to Murray State on January 5th, we're looking at 7 consecutive wins for Drake, including an overtime win against Missouri State, which probably was the savior for their at-large hopes because that Missouri State team has 0 wins in conference play. That would have been a tough one. But Drake just keeps winning. They have a tough road swing ahead with Southern Illinois and Murray State looking for revenge there. But, there's a lot to like about this Drake team.
Oh yeah, it's a team full of winners, and that's what helps them in these tight moments. They're going to win a lot of ugly games because of their lack of size and overall athleticism, but they have leadership and cohesion, and an incredible coaching staff. Those are three things I would go to war with over a lot of other things. So they've got the moxie to get consistent wins, and they've shown that throughout the year. Besides the 2-game losing streak, that's their only slip ups. But they've pulled games out in OT. They've pulled games out down the stretch. And you're right. Like coming up at Southern Illinois, that's an improved team with Kennard Davis back, playing very well right now. And Murray State, of course, already beat Drake, so they're going to have to stay locked in. But and Northern Iowa should add got some very unfortunate news where Leon Bond is going to miss what I think is the rest of the season. They said 6 weeks.
That's a tough
but
one.
yeah, and
That's pretty much the whole year. We don't have that much time left in the year.
Yeah, especially with Arch Madness being early. So
Yeah.
that's an extra week right there, just with that going early. So yeah, it's unfortunate. I got to see both these teams during my Midwest swing, in December, and Bond was like, he had his career night when I was there against Montana, 37 points, could not miss. Just a beautiful player. Hopefully he can make a full recovery.
Yeah, another one of those high major transfers from Virginia. But here's the thing about this win for Drake, and also the game we talked about previously with UIC winning against Bradley. The more UIC wins, the better for Drake because they lost to UIC. Right now,
Yep.
UIC jumped to 102 in the net from 116. I believe to be a quadrant one road game, you have to be in the top 75. So that's a
Yes.
bit of a jump, but it's not impossible. That's only like 20 something spots. They could definitely get there and become a quadrant one game for Drake. Not going to say it's for sure, but that could happen. But the other team that keeps winning that is helping Drake is Vanderbilt. They beat Kentucky last weekend, and they seem to be an NCAA tournament caliber team. And the more Vanderbilt wins, the more that helps Drake solidify their conversation for an at-large bid, because that's their one win where you can really look at it and be like, okay, this team has that big win over an NCAA tournament caliber team. It's not like a top 10, top 25 team, but Vanderbilt's pretty good, so that win should carry some weight, right?
Absolutely does. Yeah, it's critical to have a win against a tournament level team if you get the chance. Last year with Indiana State, I don't think they played one, so that
No.
was a big thing. That kept them like a more of a mystery. Whereas Drake's proven it. And the other good thing I think for Drake is that Kansas State's starting to figure. They just had a couple blowout wins, which at least for the numbers, it's helping Drake a little further. So I'll do a quick refresh. I actually didn't look at this yet today. We're doing this live together. But in the strength of resume now, yeah, it's showing up. I think Drake was 44 to start the week. They're already up to 39 in resume.
There we
I think
go.
that's a really good spot for them. And I'm guessing their wins above bubble and all the other factors that are available to the committee have improved too. So those two teams being in power conferences, if Kansas State can keep rebounding and at least get to respectability, and then obviously Vanderbilt being a projected tournament team, they'll be in great shape. But again, all these any Valley home loss is
Can't
borderline
happen.
suicide,
Yeah.
suicidal, and then depending on the road loss, that could really bury them too. So they just got to keep focusing on what's in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big advocate for the two bid valleys, so Drake, you need to keep doing your thing. Do not leave us hanging. Do not disappoint us. That's all we really ask here on this show, the Mid-Major Show. Let's talk about some of our winners, though, from last week. Want to get into your two winners of the week, Rocco?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to start with a team that I don't think has ever been mentioned, at least during my involvement on the show, and that's the American Eagles.
I think you have.
Uh,
I think you specifically have mentioned them, though.
I probably
Like,
have.
yeah,
I probably have. I don't think I've focused too much on them, but
no,
Matt Rogers, the best player in the Patriot League. I think I've mentioned that before.
you did mention
And
that. I'm positive of that one.
and last year, Colgate only lost twice in the league. One of their losses the only loss they had at the end of the year was against this American team who brought Rogers back and a lot of the starting five, and that's why American was my sneaky pick to win the Patriot tournament this year.
Uh,
And last week they got to play each other for basically a first place tie. Colgate had a 1-game lead going into DC, and Matt Rogers did not let me down. He showed up. He did have 5 turnovers, but besides that, 26 points, iced the game in the final minute, added 8 rebounds, locked down one of Colgate's better players. I think that was Jalen Cox, who only had 11. So American really backed that up. And here's where they would have probably slipped a year ago, is having to go to Lafayette here just on Wednesday. And that game was tied with about 4 minutes left. that one I got to see the end of before the game I was covering started, and they were awesome down the stretch, winning that thing by 7. And now you turn around and Americans won 6 in a row. Sean, they go from 1-2 in the league to 7-2, and they're in command. Next to Army, so they do have Army 6-3, and Colgate's got 3 losses now. So you have American hosting Army on Saturday. But again, that game's at American. I expect American to be able to handle their home business. Army's been an awesome home story. They just beat Colgate last night themselves.
Yeah, I was gonna
But
say, be nice to Army. That's the squad they got over there.
yeah, they're playing well, and they run a great system under Kevin Kuick. But I think the story right now, American 1 game in first, and if they beat Army, there's a good chance they'll have a 2-game lead by next week.
That's big. But yeah,
Who
that
do you
Army
got?
team, yeah, I'll get into mine in a second here, but that Army team, they're not one of my winners because I was going to have them, but they did lose to Navy, so I feel like that sort of defeats the purpose of being a winner. But that
Yeah.
Colgate win was really impressive. I watched most of this game, and the way Army's offense ran, it was just so smooth, and they have a lot of scoring options. I mean, Jalen Rucker, he's their
Hmm.
best scorer, but he only scored 9 points. He had 5 assists though, and he got switched on to Jeff Woodward, who is one of the better players in the Patriot League. But he's a 6'11", 270-pound big man. Not the most fleet of foot. He's just an absolute bruiser down low, but he kept getting switched onto the really speedy Jalen Rucker, and that was just a death sentence because Rucker was able to drive in and kick to shooters, and they were just drilling threes left and right in that first half, especially freshman Kevin McCarthy. 14 points, 4 threes, came into the game averaging 2 points per game, and off the bench also Tate Lachkowski with 9 points, and he hit a three as well. So that bench production from Army was really big in this one, but I really like this starting lineup. Their top 4 scorers, Jalen Rucker, Ryan Curry, those 2 guards are really good together, and then Josh Scovin, 16 points per game. He's a multi-dimensional forward, can defend. He's got a lot of skill to him. I like that kid. He can really, really play. He's not a great shooter, but he does everything else super well. He's a winning player. And then AJ Allen's back. His brother actually
Yeah,
goes to
Alan's back.
Samford. Yeah. So Riley Allen's back. Their father likes a lot of my tweets, so shout out to him as well. But yeah, so
I love those
Samford.
parents.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, anytime I tweet about Samford or Army, 99% chance his dad's liking my tweet. So shout out to him. But yeah, that Army team is good. Kevin Kuick's doing a really good job there. They have never made the NCAA tournament, and I mean, what a great American story that would be, right? The Army, the troops. We got to support the troops on this show, and Army making the NCAA tournament, I think, would be really cool. And if there's an Army team that I can remember in recent memory that can do it, I think it's this one, especially with the way the Patriot League is right now. Colgate's dominance isn't what it was. Like, Colgate's not that good of a team
No.
this year. Woodward's a stud. He gets doubled constantly because there's nobody in that league that can defend a 6'11", 270-pound big man one-on-one, but they don't really have the shooters. They don't have a stud guard. It's just Matt Langle's doing the best with what he has, but he doesn't really have the Jordan Burns, the Tucker Richardson, the not even Jack Ferguson. He just doesn't have those kind of guys this year. So he's having to rely on Woodward a ton, and when the shooters aren't hitting shots, it's probably going to be a long night. So Army, American, they're going to have a great chance to make the NCAA tournament. But that was a long-winded way of giving love to the troops there. So let's
Yeah,
move on. No, go
yeah.
ahead.
One thought on that, just maybe for the younger listeners or the listeners not as familiar with Army's history, but they've been playing basketball since 1903, and
Yeah,
in
I remember
19
that year for sure. Yeah, yeah.
there you go. In 1944 and 1968, for various reasons, I think war or political reasons, they turned down invitations to the NCAA tournament,
Wow, I
and so
actually
that
didn't know that one.
so those were the only 2 times they've ever been invited, and so they've still, and here we are, 2025, 122 years later, Army has never played in the NCAA tournament. So this story will take off like wildfire
Hmm.
if they even sniff the Patriot League finals.
I really think this team has a chance too. I'm not just like saying that to have a different
Yeah.
opinion. Like when watching this team, I'm like, this team can do that. And there's actually quite a few teams this year. I'm pulling up a quick list here before I get into my winners. How many teams do you think you can name that haven't made the NCAA tournament? There's a lot, actually, more
Well,
than I thought.
if you count the newer teams, those are all slam dunks, right? The ones
Yeah.
that have not transitioned yet, including UC San Diego. But the
On
older
this
ones,
list
you've
on
got
NCAA.com, those aren't included in this
the
list.
old ones. the old ones that always stick with me are William and Marion Army because they've been
Yep.
playing. They've both been playing like basically 100 years or more.
hmm
That's pretty ridiculous that they just haven't tripped and fallen into the tournament one year.
Yeah.
Uh, so, but yeah, I know the list is long. There's actually a pretty good Twitter account called the Never Made the Tourney Club, and
Okay.
I don't think the account ever tweets until March, and then eventually it'll do like a an RIP for the when
hmm
William and Mary gets knocked out, and anyway, there's a lot of good information on that.
There's a couple teams that could leave this list this year. I mean, Purdue Fort Wayne, they got a shot. That's a good
Yes.
team.
Oh, absolutely.
North Alabama, they got a
Yeah.
shot. They got a
Yes.
shot.
UC San
Quinnipiac,
Diego.
I'm shocked they haven't been there, honestly. I'm shocked
Yeah.
Quinnipiac hasn't made it at some point. UMass Lowell, they've really scuffled, but maybe they
They
get
got a
there.
chance.
Yeah,
They have a
South
chance.
Dakota, they just beat Omaha. I don't think they're going to win the conference tournament, but they beat it. Yeah.
It's in
But
their
another,
backyard. They play in
yeah.
their backyard. Sioux
Yeah, and
Falls.
another one of your winners that we'll get into next in a minute is another one that has never made the tournament, but I won't spoil that for everybody else yet. I'll get into my first winner, though, before I spoil it. I got to pull up my list here. Yeah, so the one I'm going with is kind of a team uh, that I wouldn't say has had a ton of recent success, but I really like the way that this coach and his team play, and it's Jace Coburn over at Portland State. They made a lineup switch about a month ago where they put Trayvon Minot into the starting lineup. I think he's starting most of the year, but he plays way more now. And he's a South Carolina transfer, another high major guy. And the way they play now, this team is so big. Four starters that are 6 foot. I think all their starters are 6'4" or taller, because I think Jalen Henderson also is. But they had a really good week. They're on a winning streak. They won 2 games last week against Idaho State, I believe, and Weber State. So not huge teams in the Big Sky, but they're definitely competitive. They are third in the conference right now. They lost by 3 on the road at Northern Colorado, the top team in that league a couple of weeks ago. And the way they play, I mean, they're tough, they're physical, they're going to defend, they're going to force some turnovers. And those bigs, Terry Miller, 6'8", Trayvon Minot, I think he's 6'10", Isaiah Johnson, 6'6", and then you have Keont Myers at the point guard position. He's 6'5", one of the better passers in the country, great assist numbers. I think he's top 10 nationally in assists per game. And then Jalen Henderson, just a big-time athlete that can really shoot the ball from the outside. So Portland State, I mean, I think this is their chance here. Obviously behind Northern Colorado, behind Montana, but they're third in that conference right now. There's a time for them to really make that jump and make an NCAA tournament run. Kind of feels like this is the one because the door is open at being the Big Sky.
Right, and I mean they've been phenomenal, shooting the ball very well, especially in the last month of play. They're one of the teams that kind of pop in terms of just running the numbers from the last like 3 or 4 weeks. They're performing as a top 100 team in the country right now. That Northern Colorado game you mentioned went down to the wire. They're hammering the teams. If you are a really good team or a great team, you hammer the bottom Big Sky teams. They're handling that so far. They'll have some road tests. I think they're on the road this week, so that's always interesting to see how that's going to play out. But
Mm.
well deserved shout out. And Terry Miller spells it with an I. My dad Terry Miller spells it with a Y.
Oh,
Otherwise,
wow, that's an interesting thing you got there. I think he's
otherwise great name.
I also
Great
think he's
name.
Terry Miller Jr. Is there any relation there? Or
There is not.
is he secretly your sibling? Okay, that'd be something.
Well, we're all related somehow, Sean. We're all
Yeah, yeah,
Millers here, so it's all
yeah.
good. And he is from Fresno, so big miss by
Hey,
Fresno
hold
State
on. Yeah,
not getting him in the portal. I'll tell you
yeah.
that.
Fresno State doing a lot of missing right now. They're not doing a whole lot of good. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, that's tough over there. I want them to do well eventually. I mean, there's everybody I've ever met and worked with at Fresno State, the best people, but obviously a football school. So we'll see if
yeah.
that changes anytime soon. Not
I'm gonna
looking good
say
over
no,
there.
but
All right, so Utah Valley is that team Sean was hinting at earlier, never made the tourney club. The Wolverines have been a tremendous story in the WAC. All you heard about preseason was Grand Canyon this, Grand Canyon that. Utah Valley was a little bit of an unknown. I think picked fourth, anywhere between fourth and sixth, even from what I remember. And I think they did end up fourth in the media poll of preseason with Seattle up there towards the top, and I think Cal Baptist as well. But and UT Arlington's a team, I kind of whiffed on. The UT Arlington's playing better lately, but I certainly had them too high.
yeah, you had them like
Preseason,
seventh in all of
I did.
mid-major teams. That's what. Hey, I will say though, you had Drake really high. There was 2 teams I was like,
Yeah.
we were nowhere near each other on. One was Drake, and one I don't even think I had Drake ranked. and UT Arlington was the other one. So, I mean, hey, you win some, you lose some. You're batting 500 there, 500 on base percentage, like Barry
We'll
Bonds.
take it.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll take it. Arlington did take Utah Valley to overtime, so we'll see. Arlington's not out of it yet. They're out of it probably for the regular season, but definitely it will be an interesting team in the WAC tournament. But Utah Valley today, 10 games, 10 game winning streak, 7-0 in the league. But the week they had last week, I did not think they could pass both tests. Tough
No,
travel, starting in Riverside at Cal Baptist, a really good home team. They pulled that one out late down the stretch. I watched the end of that. That was right after that Riverside game, late night. I think that was an ESPNU game. 74-69 there. And then they got to turn around on a tight turn and get up to Seattle. That's a good couple hour flight up there. Seattle's tough when they play in the Red Hawk Center where there's 1,000 people or less in that little box.
the big
And
inflatable Red Hawk too.
the big inflatable Red Hawk. Yeah, it's a tough place to win. Seattle. The data shows over the last 5 years they play much better there than at the larger arena, the hockey arena. So they got it done in the box. A 4-point win down the stretch, 2 wins down the stretch. A lot of clutch plays. I was on Utah Valley Radio yesterday talking about Dominic Nelson. That guy looks like a big time player. I could
Oh
see,
yeah.
if he puts on some muscle, like he'll get some Power Five calls probably right after the year. We'll see what Utah Valley can do to keep him around. But Tanner Toolson,
Probably not even
uh,
waiting until the year's over. He's probably getting them right now.
of course, yeah. Let's be honest. But Tanner Toolson, he comes from that great lineage of Toolsons.
Hmm.
Two or three of his brothers were stars at BYU, or at least role players at BYU. Now he's doing it at the little brother school, Utah Valley, 6 miles away from Provo, and he actually played his high school ball in Washington. So I followed him for. Unlike many, I was familiar with Tanner Toolson's high school game, and pretty amazed that Utah Valley's been able to develop these guys, keep them around. Grady's been a really nice big at 6'9", 215, and Carter Welling at 6'10", 225. So they have a nice mix of guard play and front court, and the great athlete in Nelson. So now we set the stage, Sean. February 1st, this Saturday, 2 nights from when we're recording this, and we got the showdown at Grand Canyon. Now, if Utah Valley can pass this test, I mean, they'll have kind of blown any expectation anybody has. I'll be there to cover it. Can't wait. I haven't done a WAC regular season game in years, and I'm glad it all worked out to do the 7-0 Wolverines going to the kind of the unbeatable Grand Canyon team at home.
Hmm. You think Grand Canyon's going to take that one?
Well, they have to be the pick on paper, and you
Yeah,
look at
definitely the pick on paper.
Yeah, you look at what Grand Canyon's done these last 4 performances since they lost to Utah Valley. It's been sheerly dominant, beating Abilene Christian by 30, Tarleton, who was getting better, by 24, Southern Utah on the road by 15, Utah Tech on the road by 13. So Grand Canyon's kind of stopped messing around. We were waiting all year to see that. Now they're going to go back and play a team they've already lost to. So this is Grand Canyon's opportunity to reestablish themselves as the WAC favorites and make a statement, heading into the rest of the year. And if you run the Torvik numbers, like I like to do every 3 or 4
You do,
weeks,
yeah.
Grand Canyon's back in the top 35, and that's exactly
Oh
where we
wow.
had them preseason. I think they're 35th right now in the last 4 weeks. So again, it's limited information. It's 4 games against middle of the WAC teams. So take it with a huge grain of salt. But this is a team that we expected to see throughout the preseason, and they're finally starting to click. I think Duke Brennan's been bringing a lot to the team as a dominant rebounder. 13 rebounds in that last win, a couple blocks, a couple steals. Converting 12 points in that last game against Southern Utah. But Jacoby Coles is there, Ray Harrison, Colin Moore, Micaiah Williams, Caleb Shaw. Loke War is still extremely talented, Power 5 talent, if you ask me. He
Hmm.
started at Oregon. So anyway, Grand Canyon, very dangerous. We'll see how they look on Saturday.
Yeah, and I mean, the expectations for Ty and Grant Foster are pretty much not there anymore, which maybe is a good thing. Maybe
Yeah,
not
I think
having
that
that
helps.
pressure. Yeah, because he didn't play a couple of games ago, came back last game off the bench, 15 minutes, 7 points on the 3 of 6 shooting. It's the small steps there because clearly his confidence was just gone because he's a way better player than his numbers indicate. I mean, he's shooting like 30% from the field. I think he's like 15% from three, 18% from three. He's 11 for 60 from three this year. So not very good. But him getting going is a big key for this Grand Canyon team. But obviously, both teams are going to want to defend really well. Both teams can push the pace a little bit. Rebounding is a big key, but the thing is, I mean, neither of them are very good shooting teams, so this could be a pretty low-scoring game, even though the two both want to push the tempo. Both play really good defense, so I think ultimately that could be the big difference maker there. But getting into my last winner of the week, I'm going with SIUE, and
Nice,
yeah,
nice.
I mean, in the OVC, that's a tough league, one of the bottom leagues in the country. We have Morehead State atop the league, but just the way that SIUE is played lately, they played really well. They had that win over Morehead State, and they also had a win over Southern Indiana, who's a pretty talented team for a team that's ranked 316th in KenPom. But 11-point win over Morehead State, that's going to get you a winner for me. Ring Malith with 14 points. He hit a three. Brayshawn Taylor with 22 points. He's been around forever at this point, and I just love his story because this guy, his last year of high school, I believe he tore his ACL, and then his first year at SIUE where he was just awesome. I think like in the one of the last games of the year, he tore his ACL in the other knee, and then it was kind of a long journey to get back to where he is now as being one of the best players in the conference because the last couple of years they had a Polo Minor next to him who's now at Oregon State, had that big game against
I like
Gonzaga, and
him.
I think in a way that took away from what Rayshawn Taylor is because he didn't have the ball in his hands as much. He still had the ball in his hands, but those are two true point guards that are both really good players. And I think sometimes when you have two point guards like that, it can get tough. And it kind of limited his production, but now he's being back to what he always was, a really good player. And I mean, just good for him, good for this team. They're definitely a contender to win the OVC. Morehead State, same deal as well. Jonathan Maddox doing a really good job over there. The OVC isn't what it once was, but there's definitely some good stories and some good teams in the league.
Yeah, they are. It's a league that you couldn't really separate at the start of league play, and it's finally starting to show a couple of stronger teams. SIUE's probably been one of the more impressive. Moorhead had a really good run, but now they've hit a weird wall where they've had to play 4 games in like less than 2 weeks, and I think that's part of it. Little Rock's a team that has talent, obviously. Jonathan Lawson, a great player there, and yeah, Edwardsville, great call out. Another team that's never been to the tournament, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
They've been D1 for 16 years, so they're about due, and that's
could
a
be the
part of the
year.
yeah, that's right. And that's a part of the country that loves college basketball. They're not far from Bradley, Illinois State, that area. So I'm always hearing from SIUE fans all the time. That'd be super exciting if they could crack it this year. But again, there's even Tennessee State right now is playing some pretty good basketball. They've won 4 out of 5, and good one with Little Rock coming up on Thursday between Tennessee State and Little Rock. I certainly have my eyes on Edwardsville. I think they do have the league's best player, and that obviously always gives you a chance in a tournament setting. So
100%.
good,
Taylor's a
good call,
monster.
Sean.
Yeah, Taylor's a monster. But now I think it's time for us to get into some of our game previews for the week. We already touched on the Utah Valley Grand Canyon one a bit, but let's go with
Yes.
our Friday one we want to talk about here, and it is Yale going to Princeton. Yale, shockingly, after everything they lost from last year, as of right now, they are ranked higher than they were last year in KenPom at this time. They lost Danny Wolf to Michigan. They lost August Mahoney, ran out of eligibility. They lost Matt Noling, who transferred to USC. So they lost three really impactful starters, and Nick Townsend has really grown this year, averaging 14 a game, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. Bez Mbang continues to be a monster. John Poulakidis, 19 a game, 44% from three. Samson Allerton, he's getting better and better. Casey Simmons getting better against a Princeton team who kind of continues to underachieve. What do you see in this one?
Yeah, well, I mean, Princeton's a little undersized. I think they're missing a piece for sure throughout the year, and they've been gutsy in down the stretch. Obviously, we had Xavion Lee on the show last week talking about his 2 game winners from the week before, but they did get snipped by that hot shooting Cornell team. And now Princeton, a quick chance to redeem themselves. They got a home game with Yale. If they win it, they're back in a tie for first, and no harm, no foul. But if they lose it, they're suddenly 2 games back, and Yale is sitting very pretty up until they go to Cornell that's next Saturday. So Yale's
Mm.
got a fun schedule coming up. 3 straight road games: Princeton, Penn, Cornell. But I think Yale is the story, like you said. They They are the best rebounding team by a mile in the league. That's going to be a big problem for Princeton, I think, matchup wise. And as long as they're knocking down shots with Pulikides, Townsend, Mabang, I've liked a little bit of what the freshman brings to the table and Isaac Seliskar,
Hmm.
and so we'll see. But I think for sure Yale's a heavy favorite right now. That's what all the data is pointing towards. But but these matchups with Princeton and Cornell will really reinforce that. And over by the time they play, we'll be going into February. So over the next 16 days, they're doing their four biggest games of the year. Princeton, Cornell, 31st, Cornell 8th, Princeton again the 15th, and then Cornell again the 21st. So it's 4 out of the next 7 Yale games. Big stretch for Yale. And
Hmm.
the way they're playing right now, they're well equipped to do very well in those contests.
Yeah, I mean they're playing really well right now. The one thing I would say though, even though Yale is really good offensively, metrics wise, I do have some questions about them because outside of Pulikides, I just don't really trust their shooting. Townsend shooting like 36, Simmons is like 38, but if you look a little deeper, they're both shooting like 1 attempt per game. That's not enough to really scare a team. Like you're going to leave them rather than you'd rather let them shoot the three instead of them drive because both of those guys can drive really well, Casey Simmons and Nick Townsend. So I think that's going to be really interesting to watch how Princeton defends them. And Princeton, I mean, it's pretty clear cut. They just need big performances from Xavier Lee and Caden Pierce. They're combining for about 30 points per game. But the one concerning thing about Princeton, they're shooting 42% from 2 point range in conference play. That is just shockingly bad for a team that has been so good offensively, so efficient offensively over the years, and they just cannot score inside the arc at all. They're so reliant on 3 point shooting. But conversely, Yale is only holding teams at 34% from three, and they really struggle to defend pick and rolls. So I think that kind of bodes well a bit for this Princeton team. So it'll be interesting to see how this one fares. I think Princeton's going to take the home win. Sounds like you think Yale is going to pick up a road victory.
I think the matchup really favors Yale, but at the same time, these two coaches are very well prepared, and they have all week to prepare. It's a Friday
Mm.
Saturday league, so this being the Friday matchup, you're going to get both teams' best shot. I think it'll be a really great Ivy League matchup, but I think Yale pulls it out late.
It'll be a good one. Another one that figures to be a good game is over there in Conference USA. UTEP, who continues to really be surprising under Coach Joe Goulding, going to Middle Tennessee, one of the more talented teams in the league. Justin Porter, Cam Weston, Isam Mustafa. What do you see in this one in Murfreesboro? Definitely said that wrong, but
Yeah, you were close. Murfreesboro. That's where we're heading, baby. I wish I was going. No, it'll be a good one. Middle Tennessee's been running a good program. Most of McDevitt's career there, they've been snake bit by injuries in several different years, with almost always a good roster coming into the season. Now you see guys like Porter and Weston still around and finally
mhm.
staying healthy. Healthy. Buford's there still. So this is their time. 5 seniors in the starting lineup, and they just had a slip up at La Tech, but I don't think La Tech's lost to anybody at home in the league. They did lose to Southern at home, so no, nothing wrong with really that loss. But now, by the time Middle Tennessee and UTEP play Saturday, it's going to be a big game regardless because they're both tied for first entering the week. But they both have tough challenges on Thursday, Sean. So Middle Tennessee's got New Mexico State at home, a very squirrely, physical, you don't know exactly what you're going to get from Jason Hooten's Aggies. So
Mhm.
assuming they could pass that test, then they got to reload and get prepped in a tight turn with UTEP. UTEP's got an even harder task. They got to go to Diddle, play Western Kentucky Thursday night, coming up here today, and then tight turn for them, get over to Middle Tennessee for the Saturday. So obviously UTEP's draw is a little tougher this week, but UTEP has been impressive on the road, in my opinion. They took Louisville to the Horn, which now looks crazier and crazier strong, with Louisville basically being the hottest team in the nation.
Mhm.
And I was also impressed with their road win at Liberty. That really, really opened my eyes. Most teams can't go into Liberty and get that win. UTEP did it, and they had to be resilient over and over and over during the last 3 or 4 minutes. I caught the last 5 minutes of the game. It was very impressive. So I like the way that this UTEP team approaches road trips. They've only lost the 2 road games all year. They were both one, the Louisville one barely last possession, and then a Utah Valley one in the first week of the year. Also not a bad loss either. So I got a weird feeling that UTEP's going to win one of these 2 road games. I don't know if they can sweep this trip. And then on Middle's end, Middle hasn't lost a home game at all. Well, they did. They lost to Murray State early in the year,
That's
but they
right.
haven't
Yeah,
lost.
I remember that one.
But in league play, they handled Kennesaw. They dominated Jacksonville State, who they're tied for first with, and they dominated Western Kentucky at home. So you got to give a little bit of the home court edge to this Middle Tennessee team with 5 seniors, but I think UTEP's going to be scrappy on the road.
Yeah, this will be a good game. I think Middle Tennessee is going to be able to pull out the victory. Being at home is a big plus, and also they just don't turn the ball over that much. And UTEP forces the most turnovers on a percentage rate in the country. 24.5% of defensive possessions end in a turnover. That's kind of the style that Joe Goulding has always played, dating back to his
Yeah.
coaching days at Abilene Christian. So I think being at home paired with Middle Tennessee's experience, the way they don't turn the ball over very much kind of bodes well for a home win for the Blue Raiders. Seems like you're in agreement there.
I am, and I also think Middle Tennessee can dominate inside as well. So as
Yeah.
long as they're bringing
Yep.
effort, rebounding, and owning the paint, like that should set the tone, get the crowd behind them.
Yeah, I mean
But
their tallest player is 6'9". You know, Kevin Kalu. He's not Essa Mustafa down low. Like Mustafa is a tank. He is a big
he's a
dude.
tank, absolutely. Yeah, and you can see it in UTEP's defensive numbers. They're last in the league in defensive rebounding. They're last in the league defending the 2 point area, and they're putting teams on the line the most often. So UTEP tries to make up for it in other ways, obviously with ball pressure and creating steals and wreaking havoc. But like we said, Middle Tennessee just a little too old, a little too experienced, and playing at home.
hmm
Perhaps that will benefit UTEP more when they play in El Paso later this year. But for this particular matchup, give me the Blue Raiders.
Apparently Mustafa is also only 6'9". I find that hard to believe. He looks so much taller.
Yeah,
That I like.
jeez.
That kind of just surprised. I
He
would have
put,
guessed he was like 6'11". There, the fact that he's 6'9" is a bit of a shocker, but he's 250, so maybe
he
that's
plays
why he looks
bigger,
bigger. Yeah, he plays like he's 7 foot. Like that dude's a monster. I've
right?
loved his game for years. But we have a couple more we can get to here. Army at American, we kind of touched on earlier. Sounds like you really like Army or American at home there. That's kind
I
of where you're
do.
rolling.
Yes, and Army's been a little bit not as good on the road. Let's just say. I still love the story, but they got dominated a little bit by Boston U on the road. Nice win at Holy Cross last time out, close one, but
Without
this
Jalen
American.
Rucker, might I add.
That's true. That's true. We'll see. Army will be confident coming off the Colgate win, but I just think matchup wise, and Americans played well at home. They did get that Colgate win pretty convincingly at home. I think Americans ready to roll.
I mean, if someone can just figure out a way to stop Matt Rogers, then I think someone else will have a chance to beat them, but nobody's
Yeah.
successfully stopped him all year. So until that happens, I'm going to have to say American's going to win because he just keeps going crazy. He's such a fun player, that stretch forward that just keeps dominating for American. So I'm going to go with you on that one. American taking the win. And one of my favorite players to watch in the country is Jaron Pierre at Jacksonville State. He is such a smooth
Yes.
scorer. And Liberty is heading to Jacksonville State. Those really good guards for the Gamecocks. They have him. They have Jowie Tuca. They have Corey Cotton. They have a lot of really fun guards over there. And Liberty, you know the style they're going to play. They're going to play slow. They're going to play that pack line defense. They're going to shoot a lot of threes. Their bigs, Zach Cleveland and Owen Aquino, can really pass it. Caden Matheny and Colin Porter can really shoot it from outside. So that's going to be a really interesting game. Do you have the Flames pulling that one out on the road?
No, I'm going Cox.
Ooh, I
Uh,
like that.
I mean, life in the. I hope the atmosphere is what I remember it being when I went down there about 5 years ago. John Morant came to Jacksonville State. I made the
Okay, that
trip.
probably played a role. Like,
It definitely
is the
played a role.
environment always that good? I hope so.
I hope so too. But I've talked to their coaches about it, and that was probably a top five all time Jacksonville State environment.
Yeah, John
But
Moran
if
ain't
it
walking through that door every day.
no, but they should get behind this team. They're in a bigger league now. This isn't the OVC anymore, and they're legit 5-2 in the league. They just got the I-10 road sweep. I hope the fans there realize how hard that is to do. They just won at both UTEP and New Mexico State. They're coming home, assuming they'll be able to handle FIU on Thursday. this will put them at 6-2 going in, and a chance to leave the week perhaps either, if Middle Tennessee and UTEP both fall once, Jacksonville State will have command of the league by the end of the week with a win. So that's huge. They if they do it the same way they did 5 years ago, they got the band there right behind the basket. The place is small, Sean. So when the band plays, you could feel it like vibrating through the bleachers.
Really? Okay,
They
that's the kind
play
of
a
environment I love. All right, we're
yeah, and it's
talking.
like it's a deep South marching band. The types of beats and melodies they're playing, very intimidating for the opposing team. Yeah, it was an all-time experience for me, and I hope they can replicate a lot of that this Saturday because Liberty's a respectable opponent, also a team trying to get back into that mix for first place. So really big game for both teams, but I think just matchup wise, Pierre's the best athlete and pure scorer, pure basketball player on the court on either team. So
Hmm.
that alone should give the Gamecocks a little bit of an edge. Gamecocks defensively are not grading out very well, but Ray Harper always has tricky matchup zones, and I think he saves a lot of it for these types of big conference games. So I'm not going to underestimate their defensive struggles. One of their problems is they play so much zone, they don't force any turnovers. They're almost last in the nation in forcing turnovers. So Liberty will have the freedom to work around the zone and try to figure out how they're going to navigate it. That'll be an interesting factor because Liberty in this type of matchup could come out 7 for 7 from three, and Jacksonville State's calling a bunch of timeouts in the first half, that kind of thing. But that's why I think Jacksonville State really needs a loud environment because it'll be really hard for Liberty to get comfortable in there at all. And Jacksonville State can just take all that freedom out of it for Liberty, no pun intended.
Yeah, I'm slightly terrified of that zone, especially with the way Liberty plays, because they shoot so many threes. They move the ball well.
Oh yeah,
And
take good shots too.
Jacksonville State, 46% of opponents' shots from three. They shoot 33% from three. But the difference here, I think, is the guard size. Liberty's guards are just so small, both below 6 feet. And you have Pierre, who's 6'5", super athletic, like you said. Corey Cotton, 6'6". Jowie Tuka, 6'1", but he's really strong. So I think that guard height is going to be a real difference in this one. And that's why I think Jacksonville State will also pull out that home victory. And I think the last one we should really touch on here is Bradley at Northern Iowa. Kind of a bounce back game for Bradley. Can they get that tough road win over the Panthers? That's a tough environment. That's a really good Northern Iowa team that just lost to Drake. They have those bigs with Anderson. They have some good guard play, but losing Leon Bond is pretty
Hudson.
big. Yeah, Jacob Hudson, he's having a good year too. But losing Bond is a big one. They're always really solid
Hurts.
under Ben Jacobson. But Bradley, I mean, they just had a rough shooting night, I feel like, and just teams aren't going to shoot 51% from three against them very often. They're a good defensive team. I think it was just an off night for them. So I think Brian Wardle will have that team ready for a big road win against the Panthers.
Yeah, I've got that vibe too, just because they're so well coached. They're usually so disciplined, both sides of the ball, and they were so sloppy with it in the UIC loss, and of course didn't shoot it well. We'll see in Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa, of course, in a little bit of scramble mode. They might be dragging their feet. The Northern Iowa Drake rivalry, I don't think we touched on enough earlier, is a huge deal. It's one of the best rivalries in all mid-major basketball, if not all of college basketball. Both being from the state of Iowa, both being very successful programs, especially lately. They really get after each other. So I know that's a little bit demoralizing for the Panthers to lose that game convincingly and no Bond. We'll see. Like they've had some weird results in these past couple of years under Jacobson, despite him being a legend and a coach we all love. That sometimes they tend to rip off 4 or 5 losses in a row. They might encounter a streak like that based on their existing circumstances. So just based on that alone, and knowing that Bradley's probably not going anywhere with these leaders and these coaches, I trust Bradley to go in and get that road win on a Sunday. And I believe they're going to get that thing on ESPN2.
Oh,
Sorry, it's
nice.
ESPN Plus.
Well, close enough. They also
False
don't really have
advertising.
a point guard, which I think matters. Like R.J. Taylor was their point guard at the start of the year, and he's been hurt for a long time. They have a lot of size in that lineup now, but there's not really a true point guard in this lineup. It's Max Weisbrod and Ben Schweiger and Trey Campbell. Most of those guys are two guards or wings. They're not actual point guards, and I think that
Yeah.
really matters against a team like Bradley, who has a great point guard in Duke Dean.
Yeah, there's a lot of dribble handoffs going on, but it's not the same guy every time down. There's a lot
Mm,
of mixing and matching between Trey Campbell and Titan Anderson, and then you see a little bit with Schweiger that likes to hang out on the wing a lot, and then you use Hudson in the screen and roll, the pick and roll game, and I think without Bond in the mix there, you're probably going to see more contested catch and shoots versus what I saw earlier this year in person, where they were just humming. Really didn't matter if they had a point guard because there's just so many weapons and you could space the floor so beautifully well. It's just one missing piece like that can disrupt the flow, and we just
yeah.
saw a 54-point outing in a game where obviously there was absolutely no tempo,
Mm,
but that's the same Northern Iowa team I saw put up over a hundo on the Grizz of Montana. So yeah,
yeah.
it's a tough system to get rolling if you can't get any rhythm or momentum going. So I'm sure Bradley's game plan will be to keep them stuck in the mud.
Yeah, that'll be a good one, as all of these games will, and we'll get into them next week as we recap for next week's mid-major show. So thanks for watching again, guys. Sean Paul, Rocco Miller. Follow him on Twitter at Rocco Miller 8. You can follow me on Twitter at Sean